Hi everybody, Eric Dorward here with the Spartan Rocketry Club, and we are going to be continuing to deal with the fin assembly here. Now, as mentioned, there are extensive gaps here. Why that's the case, I'm not entirely sure. It might be something that I did. It might just be kind of unavoidable. It may be that you want to sand parts down more when you do this, but regardless, I have good sized gaps, especially, that one's pretty bad. That one's pretty bad. Yeah. In this video, I'm going to attempt to deal with that. So this is where I'm going to break out my epoxy clay. As mentioned, this stuff is clay. At least there's some clay in it, but it also has the binary adhesive qualities of epoxy. So there's a little bit of protection right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break out my hobby knife. I am going to, it's like some of this stuff got, the protective end cap got a little bit stuck there. There we go. Peel that off. Yeah, there we go. Anyway, this stuff works like clay. Again, I'm going to be using gloves because I do not want to get the epoxy on me, for it is not kind to humans in general. All right, so I'm going to cut myself a little bit here. And you'll notice that when I cut it, it's got two colors to it. That's the epoxy part. It's a binary. So I need to mash it together. And a warning, word of warning, that this stuff, I don't know, in my experience with it, I tend to rip through these gloves working with epoxy clay. So be gentle in general. And if you rip through the glove, then it's not really protecting you anymore, is it? So you need to mash it together so that the black or the gray and the white parts blend. So we get kind of we don't want it marbled like that. We want a consistently kind of light gray color. And I'm getting there, but I am not there yet. This will take a little bit of time. Yeah, it tends to stick to the glove and then pull the glove and tear it. So do be careful with that. Anyway, I'm getting close to the consistency that I need. Still got a good amount of marbling in it though, which is a problem. But getting warmer. All right, that's probably, it's not going to be perfect ever, but that's pretty good. All right, now what I'm going to do with it is I'm going to roll it out, and I'm using wax paper here because I don't want this stuff on my nice cutting board. I'm going to roll it out into a snake. I want it pretty thin, but I'm going to use this instead of making fillets out of glue. This is going to be my fillet. So I want it thin, but I don't want it like right there. That's too thin because it's, it'll just, that won't be any good. All right, that's probably about the thickness I want. So this should be enough to do the front and the back, at least the front and the back of a particular fin. All right, so once it's in place, I'm just going to push it in with my finger, my thumb. And this is the part where I tend to tear the gloves more than anything else, because I am purposefully, sticking my glove and pushing it, and that is definitely the place where it tends to snap. All right. Also, while you're doing this, you really don't want to get like thumbprints in your work, because you can sand this stuff, but I found that to be very difficult. So when you're tamping it down here, try to be somewhat consistent about it. I'm putting little lines in because there are lines in my glove because of how I'm holding it. So I'm going to try to avoid that as best I can. All right. I'll repeat the process over on this side. do, I've got excess, which just means that's more for later. Push it in again. Yeah, you can see I've made a lot of indentations in this that I'm going to have to smooth out before the epoxy hardens. But the good news is that in doing this, I have accomplished a couple things. One is I've pretty clearly filled in any kind of nasty gap, you know, that I left. Yeah, I have to readjust my glove here because it's getting kind of bunched, and that's making extra impressions here. There we go. Anyway, it's filled in those gaps, and this stuff adds way more strength than you would get using just a glue fillet like we typically do. I'm going to use this pencil here to push it in. It should be a little bit more consistent, a little fewer lines to it. And do the same thing on this side. I think I actually used a little more clay than I needed on that first side. All right, so that's reasonably good. If you want, you could definitely trim this using a hobby knife. Now, I think I did use a little more than I really needed on this side because I've got my fillet is pretty thick. I kind of try to squish it down here a little bit. All right, so that's passable. I have a little bit of extra here, so I could at least get started on the next one. There we go. I'm not going to do all the fillets here because that would be uninteresting at best. I mean, it's fairly repetitive. But that, see, I'm trying to push it down here because I don't need it climbing the whole way up the side. But anyway, so that's the process. I have more work to do on that. But in the meantime, the other thing that I need to do is the instructions call for me to put this away for a moment, just out of my way. The instructions say that I need to apply glue fillets to the interior as well. Now, I don't think I can try to show it to you, but I think that's going to be really hard. So every place where the wood meets up with either the plastic part or the engine mount inside, I'm supposed to add some glue. I think what I'm going to do instead of regular glue, again, is I'm going to use a little bit of epoxy because I can't get my glue bottle in there anyway. So I'm going to have to apply this with a stick. And if I'm going to apply some glue, I might as well make it strong glue, right? So I'm going to make up another little batch of epoxy. Go through a decent number of these cups when working with epoxy, but you don't want to make a big quantity and then just have it turn to slag because you didn't use it fast enough. So I'm going to start off with a small amount here, probably more than that, because there are 16 contact points, but none of them need a whole lot of glue. So really do not need a giant quantity of epoxy here. That's plenty. Probably. Anyway, it might not be. We'll find out. But I would rather here err on the side of making too little and having to make another batch than just wasting this stuff. All right, so I'm going to take some. I'm going to try to keep the quantities small, and I'm going to stick my dowel in here, and I'm just going to kind of brush it up against the contact points that I see. I'm starting with painting this stuff on the contacts between the fin and the engine tube motor mount. And unfortunately, a lot of these did not dry particularly well. There were some gaps. And that's another thing that brushing the stuff in here should address. While wood glue would definitely get in there as well, this stuff tends to be a lot more viscous, and that might actually be a good thing in this case. And I apologize if I'm doing this like totally out of frame. It is somewhat difficult to see where I'm putting the dowel at any given time. But more or less, this is brushing the epoxy into place, and I'm well aware of the fact that there's no way you can see what I'm doing down the tube just because of the nature of the beast. So I'll just have to take my word for it, I guess. All right, I've done all the interior points. Now I need to this is going to be tough, try to brush this stuff in between the fin and the plastic. Maybe that can help up in there. And I don't know, I'm not sure it's easier to do. I mean, there's actually a little bit more room to work with. And I think I have just about the right amount of epoxy made up for this job. Okay. Now I've done half of the sides, just it was easier for me to brush like on the face that I was looking at. Now I'm going to have to return and try to brush in the other direction. Again, if you prefer to do this with wood glue, I mean, you could. It probably wouldn't make much of a difference. But I think there's a decent chance that I would want to try to launch this rocket using a composite motor at some point. And yeah, I'm sure that the wood glue could withstand a lighter, like a 30 to a 50 maximum thrust motor, but this is a decent chance to practice working with epoxy in any way. So, all right, I've covered all the important spots here. I had a couple little drips there, and I'm glad I'm wearing my glove because I don't want any epoxy on the engine tube outside, because that is where the engine retainer is going to have to be attached. So I don't want that crowded up in any way, shape, or form. All right, so that takes care of fully attaching the fins. Now, of course, I'm not done with the epoxy clay, so I have more work to do, but you don't need to watch me repetitively add the same thing that you've seen me do more than once. So I'm going to do that off camera. After that, I guess we'll be ready to deal with the next section of the fin, maybe? We'll see. So I will see you in the next video.